America's economy. Can our government control it? So think of maybe a team of 6 horses being trying to be controlled by maybe the person in the stagecoach. You can do certain things to kind of rein in the team or give it a little more oomph to go, but it's very difficult to stop it. You wouldn't want to stop it, really, if you're talking about the economy. So it's really a difficult thing for government leaders, whether members of Congress or the president, to try to steer or guide America's economy. So perhaps it's better to be thought of like this, just trying to ride a bull, trying to figure out how to guide a bull in a certain direction. It's really difficult. And we know that, generally speaking, if the economy is doing well, people who are elected to office will probably get reelected. If the economy starts to slow down, things go badly, then chances are new people will be voted in. So first, let's talk about the Federal Reserve. There's a whole other section of this module about the Federal Reserve, so we're not going to go into it much. But we do have a national bank that regulates some of the money and how it's circulated, how easy it is to borrow money, how hard it is to borrow money, how much it costs to borrow money, all of that. That will be all covered in the Federal Reserve videos. So that's one part of what our government can do. But again, the Federal Reserve is more of kind of an indirect way that the federal government's involved, because if you remember about the Federal Reserve, it's an independent part of our government. So once you're on it, you're not really part of or accountable to the president or Congress anymore. So we'll talk more about that in other videos. But as far as controlling the economy and really how you do it, if you're part of the government, well, it really falls to 2 branches, the legislative branch and the executive branch, the Congress and the president. Those 2 branches really have the most to do with controlling, as best we can, the economy. So the Congress might pass taxes for individuals or corporations, so that would take money from people or businesses, or might give tax breaks, which would allow people to keep more of their money, and therefore they could spend on other things. If it's a company, they could spend that on hiring new people or investing in new technology to make better products. If people have less taxes, then they could buy things, which might stimulate the economy. They also can pass regulations, which could, maybe might provide a safer workplace, but also might cost the companies more money to buy this safer equipment. Think about seatbelts in a car. Those aren't free, and airbags in a car aren't free, but they're now mandated by the government, so this auto industry has to build those costs in to the price of an automobile. So generally speaking, the president and Congress really have the most control, if any. I mean, we're not talking about a ton of control, but they can control through taxes, regulations, and how much the government spends. It can have some impact on the economy. You combine this with the actions of the Federal Reserve, and really that's about all the federal government can do. They can tax, they can give breaks on taxes, they can have regulations or ease up on some regulations. The government can spend money. The government can kind of tax to bring in more money, which would hit the brakes on the economy a little bit. And then you combine that with the actions of the Federal Reserve, and maybe, just maybe, the government can have some control. But the very first thing you should think about, if you're ever going to be president or members of Congress, never, ever, ever think that printing money or more money is the answer. Definitely not the answer. Just going to lead to massive problems. You just can't print more money when the economy starts to slow down. You can't think that you just print more money, get more money out there, that'll make everything better. That's the worst thing you can do. We've seen it time and again in history books. Countries all over the world, they think this is the way to do it. Don't do it. You might be tempted to do it because it seems easy. Don't do it. So we know that's off the table. So if you're the president, let's say, what do? Well, you lean on your Department of Treasury and you say, listen, we need to get the economy going. If it's slowing down, I need your, what do you advise me, Mr. Secretary or Madam Secretary of the Treasury? Because the Treasury, of course, is in charge of pretty much all things money in our country. They print the money, they coin the money, they collect the taxes, they handle all of our debt. They're in charge of the money system. but they can't print the money and just use it. Of course, they have to just get it out there in circulation, and then they get it back through taxes. So the first thing is, okay, how much money is the government bringing in? If we're planning on spending money to stimulate the economy, whether we're talking about building roads or bridges and investing in the internet for people, okay, if the government's going to get involved, well, we're going to need money for that, and that usually comes from taxes. Now, those taxes could be on individuals, or they could be on corporations, or on rich people, or on all people. It's very complicated. But generally, it's more popular to say we're going to tax the wealthy people to pay for some of these programs. Now, of course, if you're wealthy, you don't think it's a popular program. So that's one way. You actually tax and you have the money to pay for some of the government programs that you want to do if you're the president. The other way, of course, is by charging it and saying, well, we don't have the money right now, but we'll just put it on our credit card. Now, we literally don't have a credit card, but we have a debt, a national debt. We can just say, well, we're just going to borrow the money. And presidents do this all the time. Every year, the government runs a deficit, meaning we spend way more money than we bring in, and so we have a huge credit card bill that we will probably never be able to pay off. So either we tax to pay for things, or we use basically a credit card to pay for new programs that we want, or a combination of those two, new taxes and debt. All right, so let's assume you're the president and you want to stimulate the economy. So you have to think about a few things. Well, what do you believe down in your heart? Like, what's the role of government? If you think government should be in the business of doing this kind of stuff, stimulating the economy, being active and vibrant in American life, then you have no problem with it. So, for example, you might say, yeah, let's get the economy going again, and let's stimulate the economy with a massive program to build highways and wind turbines and get some new ways of getting electricity, and we'll build bridges and roads, all of that. So the government can start projects by spending money, the money they've gathered through taxes or that they use from borrowing. Now, of course, the possible issues with this could be, the government's getting too involved and creating too many jobs could cause inflation. That's a possibility. Remember, that's when money starts to lose its value because everybody else is working for higher wages, and so you can buy less with your money. National debt is obviously one that if you're borrowing, that national debt is going to go up. And some people don't like increasing the size of the government. They think the government is the problem. But some people think government is the solution. Only the government can fix a lot of the problems in America. It has the power and the resources and the wealth and the authority to do it. So there are those who believe, if you want to get the economy going, you can tax maybe the wealthy and start some government spending. It'll get the economy humming and maybe moving if it's slowing down a little bit. And in the past, this has been done during, say, the 1920s and 30s with the Depression, the Great Depression. About 100 years ago, people were out of work. About 25% of the American workforce was unemployed, so that was a big, huge problem. There wasn't enough work. And so the president at the time believed that the government's job is to jump in and get the economy going. So Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal in the 30s and 40s, massive government spending, government programs to build dams and rivers, dam up rivers, power electricity, build roads, parks. They would create art. They would create movies. They would pretty much create anything that was a job, was part of the New Deal. So the government got extremely involved in creating work as a way to promote economic growth and try to pull us out of this depression. So whether they're building a dam or building a road or painting, building buildings, government programs all the time through the 30s, trying to stimulate the economy. The government had the money and the resources just to create jobs for people. So the government would spend money in hopes that it would spur economic growth. Of course, you have to have money to spend it, so that either comes from taxes or you borrow that money. So that's one way of thinking. Of course, another approach would be taking a less government spending in most areas. So instead of basically increasing the size of the government. How about this? How about we don't increase the size of the government? How about we lower taxes, and that leaves more money in the pockets of big businesses, and those big businesses will have money to invest now in new jobs, and that will lead to economic growth. So President Reagan in the 1980s believed in this. But again, another way of looking at how to maybe stimulate the economy. This generally has some issues as well. It could mean more wealth to the wealthy, so I guess more unequal distribution of wealth. It could lead to inflation, and it could lead to the national debt going up. Now, you might think that since we're spending less money, how could this affect the debt? Well, in this case, President Reagan still wanted to have a massive national defense, so the military, a huge spending on the military, and that led to more debt. So it is not across the board less government spending in every area. It was most areas except for the military. At this time, we were in a kind of a Cold War with the Soviet Union, and we needed to keep our military, at least he believed, and many of the country did, to keep our military up and going and strong to compete. So less government spending could mean economic growth, and this was kind of the thinking in the 80s that led to a lot of the growth in the 80s. So you've got two basic ways of thinking here. Government spending, either through taxes or borrowing the money, can stimulate the economy, help to guide it, or we can cut back on some of their regulations, give tax breaks to big businesses and people, and hopefully they will spend, and that will get the economy going. Sometimes when people stop spending money, they're worried. Prices might be a little too high. They stop spending money. That's called a recession, kind of like the root word recess, right? So you take a break. So a recession is bad when people aren't spending their money. So these presidents and members of Congress try to figure out how to get people spending, but not crazy spending, because that leads to inflation. Then you should also have some money in the savings. So it's a very delicate balancing act guiding this economy. So there's no right or wrong answer really. There's just different approaches to how you guide and try to manage this massive money system of the United States. There's various approaches: spending, taxing, government programs versus hands off, a little more let the economy be free. But either way, there are some downsides to every approach. It could be inflation. It could be more of an uneven distribution of wealth. It's a free market to some extent, right? Our economy is pretty free, but we do have some safeguards. There are government regulations in place to keep people safe, the food we eat, the places we work, the cars we drive, things like that. But for the most part, the economy is free, but not totally, so the government has some say. It is a difficult job, though, to guide a team of horses or to ride a bull in a certain direction. And both parties, Democrats and Republicans, try to do the best they can, but they're all operating from a certain point of view. They see government's role a certain way. So Democrats tend to be a little more liberal. They see government as more active and needed, whereas Republicans a little more conservative. They don't want the government to be involved so much in the economy.